Hi everyone, this is Mr. Ritchie. I'm going to go through the lens notes. So if you'd make sure to have the notes file on Notability ready to go, that way you can take notes as I go through this. So this is the very first page that you're going to have in your student notes templates. I'm actually going to head all the way to the bottom because there's space for 3 rules that we're going to be using when we do ray tracing with different types of lenses. In a second, I'm going to have you pause the video so that you can copy these down. But you're going to notice that these are very similar to the ray tracing rules that we used for mirrors. So go ahead, pause the video, copy these down, and then I'll explain these. Okay, so let's talk about some of these rules here. The first rule here, we're going to be talking about very similar vocab words like principal axis. That's going to be very similar to the same type of principal axis that we used in mirrors. Okay, but the first rule says, if the incident ray, so the ray coming into the lens, is parallel to that axis, then the refracted ray, the one that gets bent, is going to go through the focus. Okay, so that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is kind of the opposite. If the incident ray is going through the focus, then the refracted ray is going to be going parallel to the principal axis. So it's just that first rule reversed. And rule number 3, if the incident ray is going through the center of the lens, then the refracted ray is going to continue without being bent. That's going to be the easiest of our 3 rules. Okay, so hopefully you have those copied down. If you didn't, go ahead and pause the video and do that real quick. I'm going to jump up to the very first problem here and our first diagram. This is called a converging lens. Okay, it's also known as convex. You can see it's convex because of the shape of that curve of the lens. Okay, so we have a candle here on the left side. We're going to be using those 3 rules to figure out where the image of this candle is going to be. So the first rule, I'm always going to do this in red just because that's the color that the rule is written in. You can use whatever color system that you want. It helps me to keep them kind of straight in my head to have them color coded. So I'm going to erase that real quick because I forgot the very first thing that we are always going to do with these. We are going to draw a reference line right down the center of our lens. You'll remember we did that with the mirrors as well. So that's going to be a dashed line. That's just going to be a reference point. What's happening to the light rays is they're actually going to be refracted twice, once on the left surface of the mirror and once on the right side. Remember, refraction happens when you go from one medium to another. So we're going from presumably air to glass to air. But just to keep things simple, we're going to go down and use that middle line. All right, so rule number 1, here's our incident ray. It's coming in parallel to the principal axis, that black solid line that's going from left to right. And the rule states that that is going to be refracted to the focus. So there is our refracted ray. Okay. Rule number 2, we have a light ray that's going to be going through the focus to our middle line. There we go. And that is going to be refracted parallel to the principal axis. That's rule number 2. I'm just following those rules that we wrote down on the very last slide. And rule number 3, here is a light ray that's going to be going through the center. There we go. And I drew those pretty darn straight, so we're going to see that those light rays are going to converge on a point on the right side to form an image. Okay, so we're going to see that where those light rays converge, that's going to be where the flame of the candle is. So there's my flame. And you're going to see that the base of the candle on the left side, the object, it's right along that middle line. Since that goes through the center of our lens, it's not going to be bent, just like the green line. So that means that the bottom, the base of our candle, is here. So you can see that this candle is actually inverted. It's upside down. Okay, so we're going to write down a couple of things that are important about this image that we've formed. So the very first thing I said, this image is inverted. It is a real image because those are real actual light rays that are forming that image. You could put a screen right there and you could project this candle onto a screen. Okay. And also you can see that it is a slightly different size. With converging lenses, if we have an object that is beyond the focal point here, it can do different things to the size. So we're going to say size varies. If we moved our candle closer or further to the focus point on the left side, you're going to see the size change. So we're going to just say it varies. Okay, so that's the very first problem. Let's go down and look at a different example, also with a converging lens. This one, you'll notice that the object is inside the focal distance. In this one, it was outside. Okay, so we're going to still use the same rules, however. So I'm going to draw my reference line first. Here we go. Make sure that it's dashed. All right, starting with red, rule number 1. Incident ray parallel, refracted to the focus. Okay, easy enough. Next one is going to be rule number 2. That's going to be blue. That's going to be the light ray that comes from the focus being refracted parallel to the principal axis. Now in this example, we don't actually have light coming from the focus because it's behind the candle, but we do have light that's coming from that angle. So I'm actually going to be using a straight edge here. I'm using a notepad. If you wanted to use a book or something that's going to not damage your iPad screen, here is the light ray. That's the light ray coming from the candle. It's coming from the direction of the focus that's lined up with the angle. And that's going to be refracted parallel to the principal axis. There we go. Okay. Last one. Here's our light ray going through the center. This one is not refracted, does not bend. Okay, this is interesting because just before I called it a converging lens. It almost looks like the light rays are diverging. They're not coming together, they're actually spreading apart. This is an interesting application of these types of lenses. If you have an object inside the focal length, it actually acts like a diverging lens. It spreads these light rays out, okay? So what I'm gonna do before I forget is I'm going to back trace and figure out where these virtual rays are coming from. To an observer on the right side looking at this, okay, we need to figure out where those light rays appear to be coming from. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna extend these behind the mirror and try to keep them as straight as possible, which sometimes is easier said than done. We're gonna make sure that they are dashed because these are virtual rays. They're not actual light rays. Okay, there's my red. Here's my blue. Okay, it looks pretty straight to me. We can see that there is a convergence happening here. And then just to be sure, let's do the green one and see if that lines up. Seems pretty straight to me. Ignore that little blob at the end. Let me erase that. Okay, so we do have convergence of these virtual rays. Okay, so we're going to have our candle over here. What you'll notice is this candle is larger. Okay, so with this type of a lens and this type of a setup with the object inside the focal length, we have a virtual image. There's not a real image. The light rays don't actually converge onto a point to form an image, but it's virtual because you can perceive it on the right side over here. It is right side up, and it is larger, or we could say magnified. Okay, so that is a converging lens where you have the object inside the focal length. Some interesting examples of converging lenses. That application where the object inside or outside the focal length changes the behavior of the rays, that's actually used and taken advantage of a lot in different applications. So here's just a couple of quick ones here. Your eyeball here on the left side needs to capture light. So light rays coming into your eye, we want to focus those light rays onto a spot on your retina. That way that your cells can detect the light that's coming in and you can create an image that you then perceive. Yes, because it does get inverted, you actually are seeing everything upside down, but your brain interprets the signal so that it doesn't look super weird like that. Kind of cool. Here's another one. We've got incoming light rays that are pretty much parallel from the sun. The sun's so far away that those light rays are pretty much parallel. They get focused, just like rule number 1 says, onto a spot. And all of that energy from the sun can be focused onto a spot which can, light fires. So if you're stuck in the wilderness, make sure to bring a magnifying glass. You can take advantage of that. Okay. Here's another example of a magnifying glass. This works because we are holding the object inside the focal length. Remember, inside means that our object is right side up and it is larger. Okay. We can also use the fact that we are projecting onto a screen. Okay. And that's because we have an object beyond the focal length creating a real image. So projectors use it as well. Kind of cool. All right, let's jump down to diverging lens. So this is a different one here. On this one, you can see that it is concave now. So instead of convex, it's concave. It's got that inward bend, but we're still going to use the same exact rules. So I'll show you how to do this one. So rule number 1, here's my red, parallel to the principal axis, and it says it's going to be bent to the focus. However, if I were to bend to the focus on the right side, that would create a converging lens, which is what we don't have. We have diverging. So instead of it lining up with that focus on the right, it's actually going to line up with the focus on the left. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my straight edge, I'm lining it with the left focus. I'm drawing a straight line so it's at that same angle. Okay, so that's where the refracted ray goes. It's still pointing towards a focus, just not the right-hand side one. Okay, rule number 2, this one is a light ray coming through the focus being refracted parallel. So this time I'm going to line up my ruler, my straight edge with the right-hand focus. Here's the incident ray coming in. Okay. And that is going to be refracted parallel to the principal axis. Okay, so there's our first 2 light rays. Third one, this is always the easy one. Going right through. Okay, so that's going to be the 3 rays for this one. Again, to an observer on the right-hand side, we're going to trace backwards and figure out where these light rays are coming from, or where they seem to be coming from, rather. So here's where the first one seems to be coming from. I said it lined up with the focus. This is going to be a virtual ray. Make sure this is dashed. Okay. Blue one, that is parallel. There we go. This is also a virtual ray. We can see that there is some convergence happening here. And just for good measure, I'm going to backtrace with the green one. Even though the light ray is a straight line, I'm still going to make little marks here so that we can say, yes, there is a virtual ray going backwards. Okay, here's the base of the candle. Here's the candle. Here's the flame. Okay, so this diverging lens, very similar to the example with the converging lens inside the focal length. This is a virtual image. It is right side up, and it is smaller. Okay, so this diverging lens creates a smaller image as it spreads those light rays outward. Okay, I would like you to pause the video, and I want you to try this one on your own. On this example, the candle on the left-hand side is beyond the focal length, but I think you can do this using the same rules. So go ahead and pause the video, work on this for a little bit, and then we'll pick it back up and check your work. All right, let's check to see what you guys have. Okay, so here's the example. Looks very similar, doesn't it? Okay. Even though the object is beyond the focal length, we still have a virtual image. It's still right side up and it's still smaller. The drawing even looks pretty similar as well. Okay, so what's interesting about these diverging lenses is it doesn't matter if the object is inside or outside the focal length, you're still going to create a smaller virtual image that's right side up. Okay, so diverging lenses also pretty cool. They've got their own applications. One use that is used a lot is with glasses. Okay, if you have myopia, which is a type of nearsightedness, what basically that is your eyeball is a little bit too long. It's a little too stretched. So you have a focus point that instead of being where it needs to be on the very back of your retina, it's actually a little bit far forward in the eyeball. Okay, so you create this diverging lens, put it right in front of your eyeball. It spreads out the rays a little bit. That way your lens can adjust that focus point back to where it needs to be. Okay, here's another one. Camera lenses have a whole ton of lenses in them. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7 lenses in here. I do see one diverging lens right here, and it's actually smashed right up against a converging lens. If you only use converging lenses, sometimes you get these distortions or aberrations. Basically makes your image not as sharp as you want it to be. And so by putting it right next to a diverging lens, you're actually going to correct some of those issues. So that's kind of cool. Here's another one. If you've ever seen a peephole in like a condo or an apartment or a hotel room door, it uses a series of these concave diverging lenses to kind of squish the image of the people beyond it into this tinier image, which you can then focus onto your eye. So lenses are pretty cool, lots of cool applications. Hopefully this video was helpful for you as you're learning these different ray tracing rules. Make sure to ask your teacher for any questions if you're confused or if you're stuck on anything, and have a great day.